Some people have noticed that in comic books, the feuds seem kind of silly. It's not like grown businessmen, women having feuds. It's kind of amateur hour. It's like what you remember from junior high school. Is that true? And by the way, you're like, what? What is he talking about? If you go on Twitter and you watch how sometimes comic creators on whatever side they happen to be on, it seems like pretty low bar, like eighth grade level. What? Why? Why in comic books? Why is that? Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is one of those videos where you're either signing on for my premise at the beginning, and then we can have a good dialogue, or you're like, I don't know what he's talking about, and click away now. But it's come about more than once in the shop, on social media, on other places, how comic creators tend to be a little bit more, maybe the word is petty, where a lot of this stuff is concerned. They tend to be a little bit more. The arguments are a little bit more low bar. I mean, case in point, if you go on Twitter right now, there's this whole, and I'm not going to talk about the people involved, but there's a practice of sending out memes. Basically humorous images with words on them. That's the worst description of memes ever, but whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Or if you don't, then this video is not going to make any sense anyway. Anyway, there's a practice of sending out memes with dildos, and that's kind of like the ultimate insult is like dildo memes. And then on the other hand, you've got creators who send pictures of their butts, and I mean, this is not like a highbrow trolling. This is pretty much low, lowest common denominator discussion back and forth. And you look at something like, I mean, it reminds me of junior high school. So why is that? Why is that true in comics? And it's true with other things too. To some extent, the game industry, although the game industry, the engineers and the people who actually code and work on the games, they typically don't get immature at this level. There's plenty of it. Everybody's like, no, there's lots of examples. No, there's plenty. There's always some, but as a whole, you don't see people kind of fly off the handle and do this kind of stuff that you see in comics. Other businesses, I mean, you don't see like people in the banking industry or the medical profession. I mean, imagine like if Pfizer and Procter and Gamble, like the various people were like, "Go, you look like a penis." I mean, really? You just don't see that kind of banter back and forth. So why is it? Why do you see it in comics? You can say, "Hey, well, comics is that's kid stuff. That's not like a grown up profession." And to that, I would say, except it's $1 billion industry. And certainly when you count in the movies, it's $1 billion industry. If you have somebody who's a crazy lunatic who's closely associated with, Captain America or Iron Man, that's going to cause a dent in those movies. We've seen it happen with things like Star Wars. You see Marvel take steps and Disney take steps to separate themselves from people like Chuck Winding who go on weird obscenity laced rants, very immature looking rants. Forget about the politics of it. It's just the comments in general just don't play well. And they don't want to tarnish that brand. They don't want for Star Wars to be associated with this. So they weed themselves out of that. So why do they put up with it in comics? Well, for one thing, comics has this weird insulated behavior where the movies make all the money, the comics are there supporting the movies, the people are kind of behind the comics, the people behind the comics are on social media with their own accounts. And so there's a little bit of insulation there where it gives enough deniability that people aren't looking that close. On top of that, comics don't make all that much money, but the movies and the properties do. So there's another layer of insulation. It's just, it's this slightly below the line subculture that allows for a lot of kind of crazy shenanigans and other things to, for people to get away with it. But the other result is I think that there's a general behavior of kind of pushing for attention. And if you're in the entertainment business or the writing business or the creative business, you generally, you're either confident and secure of yourself. That's option A. That's very few people. Or there's option B, which is you're constantly looking for some attention or some validation. It's why you have people that, in theory, become successful. They're writing or drawing or involved in some of the biggest properties in the planet, and yet they will go on social media and they kind of expose themselves into, metaphorically, of course, not, well, sometimes in real life too, when they take pictures of their butts, but there's an almost insecurity that really gets broadcast out, where people will say things that it says a lot more about them than the people they're arguing about, are arguing with. When Chuck Winding goes on this kind of crazy obscenity rate, tirade, you might say to yourself, well, he was pushed to his limit by a bunch of trolls and toxic fans and everything else, and that very well may be true. But the difference is, Disney's not paying the toxic fans or the trolls. Disney is paying the creators who work on their properties. So you can say that's not fair, but that is where the line is. There's money taking place. There's representation of a brand, and for better or worse, the fans who go on kind of crazy rants or get really heated up about something, they're their own agents. They're not paid by anybody. They have that allowance. Maybe if they say crazy enough things, maybe that gets doxxed or traced back to their workplaces, and some of these people lose their jobs. But generally speaking, they're protected. They're shielded from a lot of that noise and that craziness. So comic books live in a little bit of a bubble, and yeah, sometimes it sets up an unfair standard, you could argue. But when you're paid to represent a brand, you generally need to represent that brand well. Um, the other factor there is just it's kind of the sliding nature of comics. You tend to work on the indie scene, and like music and like a lot of things, you tend to gain attention and cred by being maybe a little bit more vocal, more outlandish, less buttoned down, and that goes for a while. You have that kind of attitude or that behavior, and then you get corporate, you get the big gig, you get the job, and you're still trying to hold on to your indie cred, so you haven't lost the where you came from, and that kind of edge that got you to the big show. But at the same time, now you've got to play a little bit more within some guidelines and other things. You got at least some. You're not working for yourself anymore. You're not working for peanuts. You're working for, you know, six figures in some cases. Maybe not most cases, but some cases. And then eventually, like all things, your creativity starts to slide. New, fresher, hotter people come along, and you're now on the decline. You're being moved back into the indies. So in order to kind of stand out from the other young, cooler, hipper with it people, you have to go even more extreme. You have to get more attention for yourself. So you tend to mouth off more, and that's kind of the creator arc. You see it in movies, you see it in shows, writers, artists, everyone. There's that arc where you have people who are constantly kind of chasing to hold their spot, and then you have other people who are just confident in who they are, and it kind of goes back and forth. I'm not here to say which is better. It's the people who are confident. That's the one that's better. But people have to live with themselves however they are. But comic books definitely have that kind of crazier aspect to themselves because it's largely unregulated and people can get away with more, and it creates some interesting scenarios. But it is kind of funny. I think if you can put yourself on the outside, and this is where I say to all the people who kind of appoint themselves as watchdogs of creator behavior or those kinds of things, I think you'd be happier in life. I know I am. If you don't get so hung up on who said what and, oh my God, this creator said this outlandish thing, or what about this person, and you get to a kind of an almost outside perspective where you can just laugh at a lot of this stuff, because a lot of stuff is funny. I mean, it's comical. The idea that grown men and women are behaving this way, kind of the way that you remember life was like when you were 13. There's something there's something funny about that. Maybe even something empowering about that. If you're not one of those people, that you've made it, and maybe other people haven't. I don't know. It's an interesting way to look at things, and I try and let people know that it's good in life to have some perspective. That maybe, just maybe. Certainly, we want to push for better creator behavior. We want to push for better behavior from everyone, fans, creators, everyone. But on the other hand, it also can be humorous to kind of watch the the crazy circus go on and just not be a part of it, be in the audience and get a little bit of a show. I mean, arguably that's what these people want anyway in some cases. So why not give it to them? Watch the show. It's not your career that's going down the toilet. It's not your, reputation that's going to be forever marred by some weird freak out. I mean, it's weird. Like even at a very light scale, Peter David is going to be haunted by his angry Romani kind of rant at a panel at a comic show, which was a complete nothing event. He's going to be haunted by that for 20 years. And so, the lesson for all of us is when somebody's kind of lost it or going off on it, enjoy the show and let it serve as a cautionary warning. Don't let that be you. Just you don't need to get all wound up in it. You don't need to, scold them. You don't need to be Karen and and go on about it. But at the same time, it's a good lesson. Don't be that person. It's rarely in life do you get these gifts where people show you exactly how you can, blow up your own career and happiness. I'm just saying, one way to look at it, maybe not the best way. Anyway, there you have it. What do you think? Is this, is there something to it? Behavior and just kind of general silliness. Why do comic books have more of it? And then is there a lesson in there for how we can look at it and just kind of laugh from the sidelines and not get so hung up on it? I don't know. You tell me, what do you think? Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, leave your comments below of, like I said, what you're thinking. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.